Hello, I'm Matthew McGibbon, and this is Assessment 1 for Nature of the Learner. The following presentation looks at my personal experience in a classroom and critically reflects the different child development and neuroscience theories that were used. Now, my schooling commenced 34 years ago, so what I can recall is pretty limited, but I've just focused on things that I really could remember from that time. So let's take a look at little Maddie in grade 4. This is one thing I remember was the times table clock. And this was a simple exercise. Every day, every student would stand up one at a time. The teacher would draw this clock on the board, and you multiply the internal number by the external. Chant, a little bit of a chant. 1 times 1 is 2. 1 times 2 is 2. And if you continued to get it right, you were allowed to stay standing. But if you got it wrong, you were removed from the exercise. Now, there's implications as a result of this. Firstly, I remembered my times table. They made it in the long-term memory, but quite often I was embarrassed and removed from the activity, and as a result I wasn't motivated to learn, or rather to avoid that situation where I was being punished. And I was the type of student that really needed that help to learn. So one other exercise, or one other implication we'll look at in this presentation is just touch on classical conditioning by association. So let's look at the cognitive approach that was at play in Maddie's brain. And it was really focused on rehearsal, where continuous use of doing the times table over and over and over resulted in building neural pathways and resulted most likely in a myelination of the axon. And as a result, I avoided synaptic pruning probably in those early school years. So the memory remained. Now, not just that approach was at play, there was also behaviorism and in particular operant conditioning. And what I mean there is that students who were permitted to continue to participate in the exercise received positive reinforcement, but those removed got a form of positive punishment. And well, I've touched on classical conditioning before. For me, if I'm in, by association most likely, is that if I'm in public now, I freak out when I have to do times table. I can recall them in private, but when I'm in public, I think that the nerves, or there's a likely connection between the nerves of the day, being put under pressure, being punished, makes me quite nervous when it comes to them in public these days. So looking at how to improve on this, there's obviously things that worked, so we can add to those and remove certain elements. Firstly, punishment is something that can be removed from the practices of the day, and focusing more on positive reinforcement. Constructivism plays a role of really improving how things can be done, socializing students online, scaffolding. The example I've given here is one of gamification, a game called Prodigy. It's a maths one where different students at different levels all work together and they set goals and they go through different activities to learn maths a different way. So in combination with the rehearsal can strengthen those neural pathways and have really positive effects. Back in those days too, if you did something wrong in the 80s, you were often sent to the principal's office and you could get the cuts. And this form of corporal punishment was pretty dehumanizing. It made no allowances for the reasons for the behavior, whether that be social, cultural, environmental, emotional. It was focused really on just punishment. Now, studies in the area now have a humanistic approach. Most of the ones that I looked at, even just going at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that having a look at that, the child needs to feel safe and cared for and build trust, and a whack across the hands isn't going to necessarily do that. Active listening plays a part, as does self-reflection on behaviours. But even more relevant in this, to deal with these behaviours, a Christ-centred, Bible-based worldview could apply, where you look at the teachings of Jesus to be able to help guide and frame a change in the behaviours of the students. I looked into humanistic and Christ-centred worldview approaches that worked in cohesively, and there wasn't too many, but I did come across a paper which was done by Hart, which gave 7 guiding principles for the Convention of Rights of the Child in the UN, moving away from corporal punishment. I'll just touch on 3 of those. 1, humanistic, respecting the child's dignity. We're not owners, but stewards and protectors of children. From a Bible-based view, don't look out for your own interests, but those of others. Number 2, again, self-discipline and character, justice, fairness, non-violent problem solving, just as Jesus asks us to even love our enemies and extend our love forward. And finally promoting solidarity, so expanding circle of persons who value and respect one another, just as shared values are going to really help drive good behaviours. So that they are the implications of my learning and the theories that apply.